welcome. It's our very last panel of Paris Fashion Week, so it's a very, very sad day for multiple reasons, because we've also had the sad news that Marc Jacobs is leaving Louis Vuitton earlier this morning, but hopefully Miu Prada in her signature style will perk us back up again with a Miu Miu show, so it's a nice one to end on. I've also got a fabulous panel to round off the season, but I'll let you guys tell our viewers a bit more about yourselves.
Hi, my name is Paula Goldstein and I'm the online director for Purple Fashion magazine.
Hi, I'm Jo Jones and I'm the fashion editor of The Observer.
Hi, I'm Sarah Raphael and I'm deputy editor of ID.
And I'm Amarpaul Kalirai and I'm a photographer.
Let's start, before we go to the Miu Miu show, let's talk a little bit about that announcement this morning, because we've done a Vuitton panel, so I don't want to repeat too much, but I want to know, what are your thoughts on Marc Jacobs' last show at Vuitton? Are we sad to see him go? Sarah. Because no one looked like they wanted to play.
But I did.
You were like the human.
Of course, it's very sad to see him go. I thought the collection was really nice though, and it was his first collection was all in black, wasn't it? And then this was the last collection, so it was a nice swan song. Yeah.
Swan song.
Yeah, but excited to see where the house goes, because obviously it's so Marc Jacobs' identity. See how it translates onto if it's Nicola or whoever next.
Because we were saying that this one, because he's the only designer there that's ever actually done ready to wear, so you think of it as like the codes of Vuitton, but it's not really, it's kind of
The
Marc
codes of
Jacobs.
Marc.
Who would you guys like to see there? Are we excited about the prospect of it being Nicola Ghesquière?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, yes. No. I think, Marc it's amazing and it's fantastic what he's done, but Vuitton and Marc have become a very similar thing over time, and I think, if Nicola goes there, I think he could really push and do something truly incredible to have that kind of, the support of a massive house like Vuitton. It could be something really, really exciting.
Do you agree, Jo?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a very interesting time, and I think sometimes when these things happen and there's always a big shake-up, I sort of wonder how long this has been in the pipeline.
Yeah.
When he left Balenciaga, there were all the rumours then that there was going to be a shift. So I think it's an interesting time. It'd be interesting to see if he goes there, what he does with it. And as you say, having access to an amazing team.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And also, we were talking this morning, it'd be quite interesting to see the trickle-down effect of him going there, like what other personnel changes does that spark off? That's always makes for good viewing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's quite sad though that you only hear that he's leaving on the morning of the show, so there's not enough time to prepare and kind of analyse it in a different way.
But I think he also wanted to do his big show and say his big farewell and not have people talking about it before. He wanted to put on this big pantomime and an amazing performance and be like, I'm done, this is me, I'm out, and then let people kind of make their peace with it.
Were you sad to see him go, Paul? Were you?
I think it's kind of exciting to see what Marc Jacobs is going to do next, and like you said as well, just to see what Louis Vuitton's going to do next as well, and where it's going to go. I think like Marc, he made such amazing shows there, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, we said
next.
that a bit earlier as well. I'd be really interested to get you guys' opinion on this. We talked a little bit about how, as much as it felt like it was kind of a funeral of his time at Vuitton, it also felt, especially to me, I felt like it felt like a funeral of that kind of theatrical, opulent, narrative fashion show, where it is a story, because no one does that anymore. And it's interesting to tie this to Miu Miu, because that's I think Miu Prada does still do that. Her sets are fantastic and you get the sense that there's a story. But are we losing that a bit in fashion? The narrative designer, I mean.
There's Carl still doing it with Chanel, definitely, and and obviously Miu, but maybe there is a different generation. Like when we talked about Dior and Raf's, it's like an essence of an idea, but it's not a full kind of script.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be a shame to lose it, especially for Paris. I think that's what Paris is about. But
how does it work for you, Paul? Because obviously as a photographer, you must have to take a look and you kind of try and put your own narrative on it. Do you prefer it when the clothes kind of come without a story? Or?
Well, something that I've been noticing like this season especially is with like brands like Celine and brands like Givenchy, they really their clothing themselves are taking the narrative and they're making the whole story. It's not really about a set or whatever. It's like the backdrop or whatever is just a plain canvas for the clothing. Like I really think they're putting their story across through the clothing rather than the set. I mean, actually, when I think about it, Givenchy, they had kind of an amazing set.
With the car. No, but I get what you're saying, with the Celine particularly, that...
It's so like the idea is so there, and she's really challenging a story, an idea, just in her clothing.
Do we think that Miuccia Prada does that as well? I mean, what was your take on the Prada collection? Because for me, that felt like an incredible... There was a lot to say within those pieces. What did you think of the Prada collection, Joe?
I mean, looking at all the backdrops and the way that the backdrops translated into the clothes, I think it is that kind of story that is translating through. And it's interesting what you were saying about it being about the clothes and primarily that, rather than about the sets and telling a complete story. And I think with the Prada show, it kind of enhanced the clothing, having that kind of backdrop. But I remember going back to kind of the early sort of Galliano shows that were amazing sets where it would be completely closed off. You'd walk through a door and he did Narnia. And that was, you sort of sat on this set and you felt absolutely freezing because you felt you were sitting in a snow scene. And it kind of added to the magic of the clothes. And I think there is something, and some of the McQueen shows that have just been quite haunting when you've left. So I think it works both ways, and there is a kind of puristness about, whether that's a word or not, but it is now. There is something about the sort of the Celine and I'm trying to think the other shows that I've looked at where you just literally concentrate on the clothes and the fabrication. It works in a different way.
But do we prefer to be sort of overwhelmed by a fashion show, or is it a good thing that designers are having to sort of avoid the theatrics and the tricks and just doing clothes? Is that because there's no one, London used to be the place where you kind of came to be completely overwhelmed by the creative vision. It seems even here, aside from perhaps Medium Kirchhoff, who even this season did really pare it back, it is just about the clothes. I don't know if that's...
I think that's quite a financial thing as well. It's reflective of the climate. But the thing I like about Mark's shows at Vuitton was that the show and the clothes were always together. Like, it wasn't show and the clothes didn't reflect. They were in such harmony. Like, I remember this time last year with the show when it was all kind of monochrome and checkerboard and the floor was the same, and like everything about it was in harmony. So I think that works really well. When you have a set that's really isolated from the collection, it feels quite...
It just feels like tactile.
For the sake of it, yeah.
But also, it's quite amazing when you get to be invited to see a spectacle like that. And I think because everything is so accessible to everyone because of online, it kind of adds an extra kind of magical level, which I think... I remember the Kenzo show with all the escalators. I mean, you can't get the idea looking at that on screen of the scale of that, with the models exiting on different floors. And, it's those sort of things that I think maybe there is room for that, because it's for those people sitting there actually watching the show, they're experiencing something slightly more personal.
I found it interesting that Vuitton did such an incredible stream alongside that, though, because it almost felt like there were cameras in the lifts that the girls were travelling up and down in, like on the carousel, so you saw, it was absolutely incredible, because it felt, it's exactly as you're saying, it felt like that was for the people in the room, and like that everyone there is going to talk about that for years to come, and how moving it was, and they all gave him a standing ovation. But then there was also the sense that this was, especially actually if you read his show notes, and there was a comment in it about how it's fine to like something just on a superficial level, on an intellectual level. And we had Oriel she's the fashion curator at the V&A, and she made the point that that's actually a very accessible thing to say. It is almost legitimising his shopper and saying, it's fine just to buy into a bag, and that's a very Vuitton thing. And it felt like I think it was such an interesting way to leave the brand, because in some ways it was very closed off and very for those in the know, because it was all his great shows, but it was also incredibly open and incredibly accessible, both from the stream and those comments. Let's talk a bit about Miu Miu. People always say that it flips the season on its head. It's the kind of bookends the season. Do you guys agree with that? That Miuccia Prada comes along, she does her thing in Milan, and then she kind of takes what everyone did in Paris and flips it. What's so great about the Miu Miu shows? Joe, I'll come to you, because everyone's got two issues here, and I picked on Sarah before.
I think the thing with Miuccia is the fact that you never know what she's going to do. You can never predict. With someone like Dolce, you know that the men's show is slightly going to reflect or completely reflect.
Sicily.
Yeah, Sicily, molto sexy, you know, there's that theme running through. And just as you think, I bet I know what she's going to do, she'll just do something completely different. And what I loved about last season was she did something, as an Italian designer, she did something very French. And there's always a sort of humour, and I always go backstage after the Prada shows and she explains the collection, and you always come away going,
Are you more confused?
You're more confused than when you went backstage, like the season before last, where we're all convinced it's Japanese. The first thing she says, it's not Japanese.
And you're
do you think
where did they come from? What
does she enjoy kind of messing around with everyone? Do you think is that part of her appeal, the kind of real humour and the kind of tricksiness to it? It always feels like she knows something we don't know. She
Definitely,
does, because she's so clever.
Definitely, she's always got a twinkle in her eye when she's telling you about the show, and I think, but the thing is with her, I always feel it's about empowering women, and there's always that very kind of strong sense of, I believe, I might be wrong, that she had quite a political background.
She studied political science. She did feel in it.
So you know, you always feel there's a deeper meaning to all of her shows, which
she was also, I think she had a position in like the
Communist Party.
the Communist Party, exactly. I love that about her. And do you guys agree? Do you think it does empower women? What's your thoughts on Prada and Miu Miu?
I think she's the fact she's such a strong, intelligent woman, and she's not afraid of that, and she's not afraid to kind of put these strong women out, but not in the traditional way of like being a strong, scary woman. It's like being clever with your clothes, being clever with the ideas, kind of flipping it on like you said, you know, everyone's kind of half guessing and they think they've worked her out, and and
she's not afraid to make women look silly, which I think is often when people put out a strong woman, they tend to just try and make them look quite simple. But I like that she'll, you know, last season it was really witchy, and this season all those faces, you know, she's not afraid to make it a bit.
And she's
humorous.
also talked about how it's very personally her. You know, she said she doesn't necessarily always curate for a customer, she curates what's in her heart, and I think that's why it's so hard to understand sometimes, because it's just coming from her as a complicated, you know, intelligent, intellectual woman, which is impossible to understand for anyone, I guess. So I think that's what's really interesting, and as you said, that's why you can't predict, because she's not following a formula, she's following her heart in a way.
I think with the silliness, I was reading that she has a slide from her office on the 3rd floor to the ground floor.
Really? Oh my god!
Amazing.
I just want her live. She's so cool.
I read it in this random interview, and so that made me think of a different side of her. And then I was reading the Style.com review of the last Miu Miu show, and she said about the stockings, she was like, oh, it's kind of like prostitutes and kind of like schoolgirls. And I thought, you're not so serious as kind of as people might think. I think she does have a lot of fun with it, but I think she also struggles with being a political person and being in fashion, and that's part of, you know, what she says is that it's really hard to call herself a feminist and work in fashion, and call herself a political activist and work in fashion, and she struggles with that. Bridging the two.
But do you think that that's kind of been an advantage to her, that everyone, I think she must feel quite othered, because everyone always does over-intellectualise Prada, and I guess maybe that's why she does things like say it's not Japanese, because she must find it endlessly frustrating that more than any other designer, people are so keen to be like, but what does this mean? But not just what it means, what is it saying? You know? But I think that's been her strength, because it means that she makes people think about fashion. You know, she could send out t-shirts and jeans and we'd all be like, what's she telling us?
now,
You know what I mean? And I think to have that voice where people want to question what you think and they want your opinion, I think probably more than any other designer, people want to know what she is thinking.
Also, she celebrates thought in, you know, what she did with the Miu Miu Club in London, and, you know, and celebrating women and celebrating different types of women, and having salons with women, and actually pushing girls, you know, to speak, and women to speak, and discuss ideas. And I actually took my husband to one accidentally, and he was the only man in the room, and he felt petrified. But it was incredible, you know, to actually cultivate that, to cultivate like women getting together and actually utilising that, and actually scaring a man, you know. It was quite a special
So, do you like Miu Miu? What's your thought? Because I feel like if we leave you we're going to be like, get off the panel.
Women only right now. No, I think Miu Miu, like, I think she makes women look really sexy. And I think, like her clothes kind of they cover, like her last collection does cover up a lot. It's quite like tight laced, but then little bits of it are falling off the shoulder, the stockings, the little kicky skirts and all that. Like it's all quite playful. I find it kind of sexy watching the girls like restricted moving down the catwalk and stuff.
It's interesting to say girls because I want to talk about what makes it kind of a great sister line or diffusion line or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's really interesting with Miu Miu because we did a Mark by Mark Jacobs panel. It's the first one we've done kind of a diffusion, and we talked about this a little bit. And we all identified that Miu Miu is one of the only kind of sister lines where you actually think of it completely separate to Prada, and it's almost like its statement is as important as coherent as Prada's. You don't think of it as like a little sister. But do we think it is more girly in its aesthetic? Is it younger, or is that an oversimplification?
I don't think it is that much younger. When you look at, I know that's the way they've sold the brands, that it's younger and more modern or something, but if you kind of look at Miu Miu next to Prada, one doesn't look like a little sister and the other one an older sister. Like there is the same level of maturity absolutely throughout both.
I'd say the shapes with Miu Miu for me are a bit more playful, and there's like she plays with that in a way that the shapes are a bit more playful and sometimes a bit more wearable. In that I would personally buy Miu Miu because I can run around in it, and I don't always feel like I could run around in Prada. I feel like I'd have to be driven places in Prada. And it's it's probably a psychological thing, but that's for me the differentiation, you know.
Do you kind of think it sort of feels like a family? If you went in with your mum or your older sister, there's something for everyone there. So with the Prada and the Miu Miu, whether it's younger or not, it's different personalities within a family. And if you like that line or you like that aesthetic, there's something for everyone. But I do think years ago, Miu Miu was kind of, the line was closer to the Prada line than it is now. And I think as it's evolved, it's become its own, you know, I mean, it is its own label, but it's its own thing.
I think, that's kind of what we were hinting at with that discussion. It's kind of, so it's a credit to her sort of amazing abilities as a designer that she's taken this kind of sister line and turned it into something that's got equal kind of fashion clout as her main line, you know. Yeah. The fact that people say that it kind of, I think it was Susanna Frankel actually, he said, we weren't covering Miu Miu with a panel, I think it was maybe last season or season 4, and she was like, oh, you've got to do Miu Miu. She was like, she always flips the season a little bit, she always says something funny, and it's always like a little quip on the season. Do you think that clothing has to have a sense of humour? Is that what makes fashion really great, when it does have a little bit of irreverence? I asked this because we talked about that with Vuitton this morning, but also I think it's so apt with Prada. You can disagree with me if you want. Everyone's like, ooh.
No, I think so, because actually it's the Louis Vuitton season with all the oversized bags, with all the funny little key rings hanging off them. I remember that sticks in my mind and also I think Miuccia does it a lot with her accessories. And I love the season with the shoes, with the flames coming off the back of them, and the 50s cars.
Yeah, and even this season with like all the sportswear socks and then all the jewels everywhere, like she's got to be thinking this is kind of funny. It's sportswear, but I'm gonna have bejeweled everything.
But it's a fashion type of humour. Like it's not like sportswear or high fashion. Like that's not, you know, a joke. But
it's very serious.
But it's a very, very subtle type of humour. And I think that's why, like, maybe that's missing a bit now, like why Jean-Paul Gaultier was so huge when he was, because he had this like such playful vision of fashion, and still his shows now are so entertaining. And I think it's the entertainment aspect of fashion that can be viewed as humorous. Obviously it's
I feel with Jean-Paul Gaultier as well, like his collections are so much more like trend focused. Like if you see one of his collections, you automatically know, okay, that's a safari collection or that's a punk collection. But with Prada and with Miu Miu, you don't really see you see those subtle trends really subtly, not so obviously.
I remember actually a Gaultier it was Gaultier's first haute couture collection. I remember sitting there and thinking, this is so fresh and modern and with a sense of humour. And he had denim couture dresses, which is why not, because the workmanship involved. And I remember I can't remember if it was a knee-length dress that opened down into a full-length dress of the Eiffel Tower. But and I remember one of the dresses just being a blue and white striped beautifully. I mean, I don't know what the fabric was. And I remember going to the following season and actually seeing the couture clients wearing the clothes. So, you think there's not only a sense of humour, but there is a relevance there because he's using fabrics that people would actually wear rather than keeping them for a special occasion. It's like if people have the money to spend on haute couture, why not wear it in the daytime?
Yeah, I think Gucci is a really interesting example. I think this idea of relevance, maybe it's actually not about fashion being witty or humorous then, it's about fashion kind of questioning itself a little bit and being aware of what's going on beyond high fashion. Is that awareness, do you think, maybe what underpins Miuccia Prada's success? Is that, obviously we've talked about her interest in politics and her activism in that area, but do you think it is her kind of ability to look outside the kind of the fashion circus that makes her a successful designer? Or do all designers do that?
I think all designers do it to an extent, but some have better awareness of the world outside. Some can end up being fixed in a bubble and quite closed-minded, and it's the same as journalism, it's the same as anything. Some journalists, I think, give more because they've got a multitude of interests and they're a more well-rounded person, and you see that in their writing, and I think you see the same in a designer's collection. That everyone obviously takes bits from places, but when they're taking them from all over the world, or different referencing, or understanding different industries or politics, it makes it less obvious maybe because there's so many layers building up.
Would you guys agree?
Definitely. I mean, when you look at the most successful designers, they are well travelled, they're into art, they have interests, whether it's literature. I mean, where would they get their inspiration? It would be boring if they just got their inspiration from an archive book of old sort of Dior drawings or as amazing as fashion is, and there's a real history there. It's interesting with this recent Prada collection, with the sort of inspired by South American propaganda posters. And I think also the Celine show was inspired by graffiti. There's a lot of that going on this season. So I think it's interesting. I think it comes from somewhere else.
Do we worry though that with the pace that fashion moves at now, do we think that designers starting out have that luxury of being able to see the world, think about things, read books, have an awareness of things beyond fashion? Because it seems to me like Miuccia Prada, she's an incredibly educated woman and she's been in fashion for a long time and she's had that, she's naturally built up a knowledge, but I'd worry that I don't know if you guys would agree, that a younger designer starting out now, there's such a pressure and there's such a pace.
But I also think, for example, I'd say Kim Jones is a good example for me in how he's utilised having the advantages of being a designer and use that to travel the world and seek out references. So he's actually used the advantage of being a designer to find more references and grow himself as a person.
And do you see that in his Vuitton collections?
Yeah.
Do you think that's really, Well, you were going to say something.
No, I think for me it's important to remember that we're looking at the collections of these individual designers. And for me, it's important to remember that these designers have their own experiences. And so rather than, for me, looking at where they've been or what their what grand experiences they have had, what experiences they actually have had, how are they bringing that into their collections and how are they translating it on a catwalk? I think with Prada, we kind of expect that from her. We expect that she's gonna shake things up. That's just kind of what she's done over the last, 20,000 shows.
And I think that to be a fashion, even with new designers who are going to St. Martin's or whatever college and studying design, you have to be a certain type of person. You have to be interesting and have a level of culture or whatever your particular interests are. You need to be an interesting person in order to design interesting collections, and it's no accident that the greatest designers in the industry are really weird and wacky and eccentric and funny and used to be members of the Communist Party. You go into it for that reason because you have that background already, you have that natural interest.
So do we not think fashion's becoming slightly more sanitized? I think we've talked about that a bit this season, shows are becoming slicker, the focus is much more commercial, or do we think there's always going to be the next young mavericks that you're discussing, you know, those weird, wonderful people?
I think it will just go through, like, I think fashion, like everything goes through peaks and troughs, and I think everyone's been a bit insecure recently, so obviously everything's been a bit pared down and careful, and in a year or two's time we'll all be bored of careful, and, you know, things will start to stabilise and the economy or whatever will happen, and it will flip again. I think, you know, you can't predict this is the way everything's going to be forever, because you never know.
Are we starting to see that this season? Some of our other panellists have said this has been the season of the unexpected. You know, Celine, I don't think anyone was expecting to see that.
No.
Celine, and it's kind of, there's been a few designers that it has kind of flipped things on its
I would say
head a
even
little bit.
Chanel this season, actually.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
push the envelope for the brand, that it's not something that they've done for a very long time. It's like brought colour in like that and played with fabrics the way they
McQueen
did.
was really different to what I was expecting as well.
And Givenchy as well.
Yeah, for sure.
But sorry.
No, I was just going to add, I thought Givenchy was quite simple this season for what it's been the last couple of seasons.
Yeah,
there wasn't so
definitely.
much logo and
Yeah. That's all I was going to say.
Yeah, but also
You're like, I'll
moved
bow
away from the heaviness and the darkness of the last few seasons, which I think is refreshing. But I was going to say there's always room for creativity, and I think that's what's so brilliant about London, is we're not scared to do it. And I think when you get to Milan, it's much more business. Yeah. So you there is a distinct difference from leaving. I always find you enjoy London, you experience London and the creativity, and sometimes it's slightly rough around the edges. You get to Milan and it's like a well-oiled machine, and you suddenly are like, these are the trends, because everybody's following I shouldn't say everybody, they're following a certain kind of path. And then you get to the beginning of Paris and you have the Japanese and the Rei Karakubas, and suddenly it's like having a breath of fresh air again. And I think it's really, really important that we never lose that, you know. I mean, as much as it's about making money and you know, surviving in an industry and having a business head, there's got to be room for mad creative people.
And plus I think fashion can never be sanitized, because fashion is change, like by its nature it's about change. And with Miuccia, you know, she was a revolutionary in the 60s, and if you take that strand of her ideology and her culture, that she is all about change, and every collection is a change, and that is kind of a burst of inspiration to the rest of the industry.
First look.
Look, here we go. You're really on it compared to you're like, shut up,
My political rampage. Here's the first look.
You had me captivated.
Yeah, I was like, Miuccia Prada, Sarah Raphael. What do I
That music feels like you're in a game.
Yeah. It was very playful. That little title card they just put up was really. And
What
this
did
looks
that
a bit
say?
like
I
Snakes
missed
and
that. What was
Ladders.
the title card?
It was just, it had little
Cartoony.
cartoony. Yeah.
It's so different watching a live stream on a panel than looking at pictures on a panel.
Yeah. So different. Let's just pray it doesn't. We've talked a bit about girlishness this season. You know, we've the baby dolls at McQueen and JW Anderson, and this seems quite girlish, and that's even just from the first look. But those little Mary Janes, you know, the pastel colours, little princessy coats. Why is kind of girlishness having a moment? Are we happy to see?
I think it's a sense of optimism, actually.
Do you?
I think it's a sense of youth and optimism, and I think people, you know, they want to kind of feel a bit freer again, and they use lighter fabrics and use lighter colours, and not be so worried about these years that we've been going through of like, how are we all going to survive?
And those tights are like schoolgirl tights.
Yeah,
aren't
schoolgirl
they?
tights. I used to have socks like that with a little frill and a ribbon. It was lovely.
And it said a lot about you as a person, whether you rolled them or folded them.
Yeah, it's true, it did. We all probably work in fashion based on whether we roll or fold
Our
them.
socks, yeah.
I can't share that.
I know, this is really like, I'm really bad, we shouldn't have put you on the end, because this is like, but I love that she did that kind of like patent skirt there, you know, there is something really, you said
kinky.
sexy,
Yeah.
it is kind of kinky, isn't it?
And how they've got these tights on that like are so schoolgirly, but then a patent skirt.
But it's that very Jane Birkin baby doll sexy. It's like, there's a definite sex appeal to that kind of youth. It's like naughty teenager.
Yeah. And I guess that's funny because she's always playing with the fact this is a younger line, you know, she's like almost feels like everything with her is a little... Has she put all of their hair onto their lips? I can't work out if that's an accident with the models, but a couple of them have had it.
I think they've
got it stuck to their face.
They do, yeah.
They've all got their hair.
So it looks like they've been
Yeah.
running.
Yeah.
Or they've been chewing their hair.
Yeah.
They're like kind of rebellious.
School
Like
girl.
running from school.
But I love it. It's such a
Busy
whimsy
girls.
to what she
Yeah.
does. You know, she's like, you can imagine her saying to the hairdresser, stick the hair to the lips, and the hairdresser's like, what? It's going to look ridiculous.
It's really reminding me of Clueless a lot.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
Like
yeah.
preppy matching outfits and yeah.
And the socks, just
Yeah.
white socks.
Yeah.
And I like that they're wrinkled around the ankles as well. It's always in the details that you
I
can...
said 60s, but it's 70s. Like it's that real.
I think the beginning of it was slightly 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely, there's a retro.
But it's that
Lovely
retro.
print.
That's beautiful.
It's like the dream
Oh,
ideal of
little
being a
cockatoos.
young woman, you know, from the past.
Yeah.
That I think I always wanted to be, and then I was like, I'm in the 90s, and it's just not happening.
Here's your chance. This
Yeah,
is
now's your chance. Take
I love with her prints on the first glance you think, oh, that's that, and then when you look at it there is this like
Yeah.
humour, like with the arrows pointing
Yeah.
up, like a this way up kind of.
Like that golfer collection, if you
Yeah.
actually look up close, there's like sharks and stuff
Yeah.
on it, and like all this weird stuff. Is amazing.
Now I want to zoom in on them.
Yeah.
So they're women's faces, aren't they? But in different, which is the same as the Prada.
Well, I think it's a
collection.
cockatoo. It's a
Oh, is
cockatoo.
it?
Women's faces.
Magnifying glass.
What's that?
cats.
Those are little cats. This is awesome.
I love that. Very
It's
cute.
so like kitsch.
I mean, this,
Yeah.
I do. This is what I expect from her. It's like
Yeah.
on first glance, it's that. No, it's not.
Yeah.
And then if you can go backstage, which is what I try and do, to just have a really close look.
There's a little bit of grandma's closet in there.
Yeah, but I
Yeah.
like that. It's like
Yeah.
it's that schoolgirl thing again. You know, hand me down. Like she's wearing her mum's
Yeah.
coat, her grandma's like
Yeah.
jumper with her little sexy like socks and stuff.
But the fabrication, I remember her explaining one season about the fact that she wanted the fabrics to be ugly and to look cheap. You
Yeah.
know, there's something in the kind of, you sort of understand that she's always looking to push something slightly out of the comfort zone.
Yeah. We talked actually a lot about that in our Prada discussion, whether, you know, ugliness is what makes fashion feel
Yeah.
new. When something's ugly, is that actually what makes it really great and seem the most refreshing?
It makes you wonder what luxury actually is.
Exactly,
Is
yeah.
it cashmere or is it latex?
She said Mutual said exactly that about ugliness. I
Yeah,
think
she
she
did,
was
yeah.
like, yeah, ugly is good because it's new.
Yeah.
But then like with Miu Miu and like Prada, I always think with the shoes, like it's often quite ugly sister.
Yeah. But I think there's always a cartoony element, you know, it's the
Yeah.
same with Marc Jacobs, like we talked about those oversized buttons this morning, but it's the same here, you know, those big pockets that we saw on everything's almost exaggerated, there's a cartoony element. And that I think that's really prevalent in this collection, which maybe ties with that kind of schoolgirl youth thing.
But I also think that when I'm styling a shoe, it's those things that give you the edge on a shoe, from it looking like something commercial or sort of an advertorial is to kind of think about things that you put together in proportions.
Yeah.
And I think this is something that she plays with a lot with her collections. It's throwing something slightly off kilter, so it's not exactly what you expect.
Well, it doesn't feel aspirational, does
No,
it?
no.
But it does at the same time, because obviously it's Miu Miu, but it doesn't feel like these are the kind of girls you see, they look a little bit shaken up and haphazard.
Glossy. It's not
Yeah.
super glossy and luxe.
Yeah, which is maybe that hair stuck to the lip thing. It's like, you know, that's every woman's nightmare. You put on your lip gloss to go to the show and you're like trying to pose outside and then your hair's stuck on your face, and she's like playing with that.
But I also like the fact that it would encourage you, if you were at art college or at fashion college, that you could actually go out and recreate this look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's also, she's very clever at pulling people into a trend.
We've talked actually a lot about that on this panel, people creating stuff. We talked about it in London, that is, you can imitate with styling, but obviously you can't imitate the actual fabrications of the craft. So we talked about that with Medium Kirchhoff. They let people in a way, because they're like, yeah, you can, you know, raid vintage shops and try and make this look, but obviously you won't be able to have the
exact.
and there's something interesting about that. Also, that print, I actually think it's like a trick of the eye print. I think it is a face and a cockatoo. So we both like.
We're all right.
I think though, with like if we're talking about how these trends will trickle down, and I just can't imagine imitations looking very good. like without it being Miu Miu.
But I think you could get like, you know, the girls at fashion college, like you said, you can get like a vintage coat, and you can get your woolly tights, and you can get your Mary Janes, and you can play with colour, and you know.
I think the little skirts will
fabrication
the
will
fabrication will
never
never be the same, but it's kind of at least being able to access it on some level.
It's the same with Prada, you know, that those faces, it was almost like she was saying, you know, try and copy this and you'll look absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what she does quite well. Because it was the same with that Japanese collection, you know, we saw a lot of, it's very hard to emulate.
I love these Rouge dresses. Rouge. Can't speak.
Too much champagne. First casualty of the panel. So we're impressed by this. We've said that it was kind of what we were expecting, because we do talk about how she's always makes us question things a little bit. It's never traditional luxury. But in terms of the actual aesthetic, were we expecting something kind of playful and schoolgirly?
Not particularly, but I think it's interesting in light of what we were just talking about, the difference between Prada and Miu Miu. Like, you can quite clearly see the difference with this collection.
Yeah, like it is kind of really different from last collection. Last time the girls were really slick hair, done up with little bows. These girls are like kind of undone hair, just washed hair or whatever.
I think I had that dress when I was like 40.
I was going to say, I thought I had that red coat as a child.
It's also quite interesting, because I was kind of reading all the reports on the Saint Laurent show, and they were saying, you know, how relevant is it? And they were talking about these little prom dresses, or these little mini dresses, and you think there's definitely, it's quite interesting when you look at two designers that are very different in their, where they take their inspiration and their aspirations from, and yet I'm already seeing a trend, a very strong trend, starting to emerge.
Yeah. But that's, do you not think that's such a part of women's lives, are those little dresses, you know, whether it's your prom, whether it's your 16th birthday, it's such a part of growing up and getting into fashion. Often like your prom dress, that's the first time you properly express your style in a really kind of big way in front of a lot of people, because you're like 16, 18, whatever, and you're like, oh.
I also feel like this has almost been like a travelling through teenagers, because now this starts to feel quite 90s with the snakeskin jackets and the, you know, it's
the chokers
and
it's Clueless.
The animal print. This is proper Clueless. You know, it's been like a travelling through the generations of being a teenager.
I think it's interesting how
if she actually said after the show, my whole inspiration is from Clueless.
It'd be genius.
But it's like a properly fucked up version of Clueless.
Yeah. It's a dark version of Clueless. Like, sorry, Sarah, you were going to say something. What were you going to say? You've forgotten.
That was a very somber point about like how like glitter and sparkle is becoming a bit of a trend as well. It's quite fun.
Yeah, I
like the dresses at Saint Laurent. And
it's kind of bad taste, I think, has been a little bit of a thing this season.
Yeah.
Like,
but then that's something Miuccia always plays with, is bad taste.
I love that.
That's great.
I think the influence of vintage is really interesting. You know, we talked about that a lot on the Saint Laurent things, and a lot of the reviews picked on that, how he'd really gone through the Yves Saint Laurent archive and literally completely copied pieces from the archive. And I think to see how vintage and that vintage explosion we saw about 10 years ago, where everyone was buying into vintage, has influenced high fashion to the point where designers are almost replicating looks. I find that really interesting. Because some of these pieces, like that dress with the pink with the kind of fringe beading, if you were wearing that, that could look very vintage. Yeah.
I remember watching the Prada menswear show where it was like Gary Oldman came out and Willem Dafoe and Adrian Brody, and whenever I watch anything Prada or Miu Miu, I just hope that'll happen.
You're just waiting for Adrian Brody. Oh my god.
Where are the celebs?
I'm obsessed with Adrian Brody. He's
very
like
nice.
You're like, he's lovely.
No, I've met, he's a friend of a friend.
Is he? Can you
nice.
set me up with him?
Yeah, we'll do a group date.
I love him. Anyway.
I actually had my picture taken with Gary Oldman after he did Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. They had an exhibition in the Paul Smith shop. Oh no, they had some pictures up in the Paul Smith shop, and I had my picture taken with him on my phone, and a friend was flicking through and she went, "Oh, is this your husband?"
You should have been like, yes, it is.
Of course. Yeah. Can I say there's a difference in age there?
I hope Miuccia watches that bit of the discussion. Be like, I love Adrian Brody. How embarrassing.
the moments where you forget it's live streamed.
Yeah, I know. It's good she's inspired a playful spirit in us, we can say that. This
I
has
want
got a
to
bit
know
more
now
print
what's
now.
on the flats at the back.
Yeah.
There's some wallpaper, but I don't know if it's...
I think you're right, she's growing up. It feels like she's transitioned from being a schoolgirl. She's now, you know, getting a bit older. She's going maybe her first job. There is a...
I think
Is that how you went to your first job?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's how I got employed here, obviously.
the music's interesting because Prada was like, it ended with Britney, work it, bitch, whatever it's called. I can't say that already. Credibility. But yeah, this is all very...
Wow. Yeah. Pardon?
We should get you on your own soundtrack.
Yeah. You should.
You can
next
do this
Jeremy
season's
Healy.
soundtrack.
I love that as a last look because also I don't think her hair was. I'm obsessed with that hair, but I don't think her hair was stuck to her lip.
No.
So it's like she grew up,
Yeah.
she blossomed, and she became a beautiful, mature woman.
I also like the texture on the floor. You know, where it goes from the checkered. It almost feels like this is suede, and then there's the painting.
Oh.
A couple of them have done that.
It's all about the floor changes.
I
It
take no
looks
prisoners.
great, but it's harming the models all.
Yeah.
It's sending very good
She
morning
rocked
to
it out.
me.
She made
but
it
I
work.
won't be
Yeah,
wearing
she
those
made it
shoes.
work.
Yeah, she
Kudos
made
to
it
her.
look good.
Is her hair stuck to her lip? I really want to see. I can't tell.
Well, it's like the lip gloss thing of having your hair stuck to your lip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh god, I thought she'd given them stairs. That season where there were stairs.
yeah,
It was the Japanese collection,
Yeah.
wasn't
Yeah,
it?
and they were all
Every
like-
single one of them fell up the stairs. It was like, oh.
That's
Come
when
back
fashion becomes humorous.
Yeah.
Do you think she'd notice if the model just decided to hide in the dark and not do a whole lap if
Yeah.
the shoes weren't working?
I want to see it all again. That's the
I
thing.
think the casting director might.
Yeah.
It's really
There's more
colourful
diversity in this one as well. It feels.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that actually. This.
of models.
Yeah, I feel like the casting's really great in this.
Well, there's Malika, who's the Prada girl.
Yeah.
You love her. You bring her up on every panel. You're like, Malika.
She is wonderful.
She's beautiful. And she was their first. She's the first black woman to be using a campaign for 17 years, wasn't it? For Prada.
Since Naomi.
Yeah, since Naomi.
That's the thing as well. Is Miu Miu they don't ever really use any of the supers or whatever.
No.
They always use the new edgy cool girls.
Can we see a story to this collection? You know, I said, oh, it looks like she's growing up. What do you guys think? Is there a kind of, as we're watching the...
I can't get Clueless out of my head.
Yeah, I think there's I feel like there was a transition in terms of, you know,
I
the
see
way.
a lot of 70s going on.
Yeah.
With the collars.
The coats are definitely 70s and those skirts.
Yeah.
And actually the woolly tights are quite a 70s thing with Mary Jane's.
But then she does it so subtly, like it's just like maybe the cut or maybe,
Yeah.
but the buttons are quite 60s, like really big buttons.
And it's quite 60s, the tone on
Yeah.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
two colours.
Especially some of those skirts with
Yeah.
the kind of the
And
two-tones.
maybe that's like a play on what's happening right now. It's just literally a mash of all time.
But
Yeah.
you're right I think it's like a mash of vintage, and you know how girls, when they buy vintage and they wear it, they don't necessarily wear a whole 60s
Yeah, they
look.
don't.
They take like
Yeah.
a 60s coat and an 80s dress and then put on some 70s cowboy boots, and I think that's almost where
it's
it's
the-
come together.
And I love the mixing of the beading and
Yeah.
the kind of ruffle front shirt with the heavily beaded skirt. I just think I think for the first time in a few seasons, this is a look that's really... I mean, I loved the polka dot last season. It was very strong, but I think there's so many components.
Yeah.
This is one of my favourite music
Yeah, it's
selections in
really
a while, definitely. I think this is
And I love the
amazing.
prints.
It really reminds me of that film Almost Famous, when there's all the like 70s,
Yeah.
70s groupies like
Yeah.
hanging around.
But I like that we were talking about girlishness and optimism, and I think there's always something slightly subversive with her collection, but this feels optimistic to me in the same way that Prada did. You know, she said that was about feminism and that was about sort of strong women, and I feel like with this it's about the girls that would grow up to be that exciting, interesting, educated feminist.
Yeah.
Prada's like the crazy older sister.
Yeah.
exactly. And as I said, like, it's about her mood. I think maybe she's feeling the mood that everyone's feeling, that, you know, things are starting to get a bit better and we can.
I think it's nostalgic as well. I mean, how old is Miu now? Like,
how old is she? She's like, oh, I don't want to say.
No,
She's ageless.
Amazing, slightly older woman.
It's interesting actually that you mentioned the age thing, because this is quite a simplistic question and I wasn't sure whether to ask it, but we often talk about who's going to take over at certain houses. You know, we always talk about Chanel, you know, who's going to be next at Chanel, who's going to replace Karl Lagerfeld. And obviously there was the same thing with Dior, everyone's like, who's going to be next? But it's quite rare that people actually say who would succeed Miu at Prada. And obviously she's still got a lot of collections in her, but she's an older designer, as we said. Who could take the helm at Prada or Miu Miu?
It's an almost impossible question.
Because it's family business as well. So she's the granddaughter of the guy who started it.
And also it's so intrinsically her. Everything about it is so intrinsically her. It's quite hard to understand a brand identity without her.
But I was thinking that with Marc Jacobs. I was like, imagine Marc Jacobs at Prada. To me, they're like so similar. But in a good way, not like they don't ape each other. But obviously Marc Jacobs often says that he's very impressed by Miu's work. But
I mean, someone like Katie Grand, even like who's obsessed with Prada, could have some sway or influence.
Well, she used to style with Prada, obviously. And then I think I was just thinking about that today, and I was like, God, that's gonna be a sad day. The day Miu Prada leaves fashion, and I think I'll leave fashion as well.
but like you said, I can't imagine anybody doing it. But they're not just going to go, I'm retiring, that'll be the end of it. But maybe what she'll do is get somebody to work on the Miu Miu collection
and bring
them in and just kind of, you know, gradually
but maybe
give over the helm to someone else and kind of, you know, it might be a natural thing that an organic thing that happens, but I can't.
I think an organic thing is exactly it, because at the same time, when Alexander McQueen died, I couldn't imagine anyone else designing Alexander McQueen, even though Sarah Burton's
maybe
doing
there's
an
a
amazing
Sarah
job.
Burton at Prada.
Let's hope so. It's going to be a sad day, isn't it? The day she decides to bow out. God. So we talked a little bit about optimism and what this says, but let's talk a bit more. What does this say about this season? Does this sum up the season for you, or does this, as we said before, flip the season a little bit? Is this in tune to what else we've been seeing? That's a really tough question, so I'll let anyone answer. Someone has to answer though.
It's like, this is like a mashup. I think that's the best way for me to describe it. And I think from everything that I've looked at this season, like, there has been not any specific trends or whatever. I think each designer is really doing something their own, like especially with Celine. Totally unexpected, not really following any trends, just doing exactly what she wants to do.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Like, usually you can see so many trends that come up, and I don't think there's necessarily that. It's all quite, everyone's doing their own thing.
I mean, I think there's
they didn't get the memo.
Art and colour have definitely been major trends, and I think maybe this does take that, and it's not based on art, but it's based on like the girl going to art college. You know, it's like the weird transient version of that.
I think it's ended on a high, whereas we've had Miu Miu shows that have ended on a low, and like, as you said, quite somber. From London, there was definitely 70s, 60s, stripe, pastel. From other bits of Paris, we've seen kind of embellishment. So your mashup is a really good description. That's Vogue need to use that in their trend report section.
Miu Miu mashup.
Miu Miu mashup. I like that.
That's quite a nice note to
I
end
might
on.
have to use that.
It's a positive thing though, isn't it? It seems like fashion's being less careful, and I said before, season of the unexpected, and it kind of does feel like that is the season of mashup and of optimism. So we can end on a high. Yay! Thank you so much, guys. That was absolutely lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.